Welcome back. We hope you're well fed and well rested because we have even more tennis. I know it's the middle of the week. Normally, we only see on the weekends. It's one of these fun Masters events where you start in the middle of the week and we got stuff, that's going to go through to next Saturday and next Sunday. I'm Alex Christensen. Joining me, as always, from the other side of the world. How you doing, Stephen?
I am doing okay, thanks. It's a bit funny doing these in the middle of the week, but that's fine. The WTA just kind of runs its own race. That's nothing new. But how's things over in the US for you guys?
Pretty good. I mean, it's starting to get hot here. I know you were complaining it's getting cold where you are, but that's kind of how stuff works. Now, also joining us, again, on the other side of the country, because it's all about me and my geographic perspective. How are you, Candace?
I am a lot better. I had my vaccine, and I felt really bad, so I wasn't with you guys, but all better and vaccinated now.
We love to hear that.
And you didn't miss much. We just both tipped Zverev, so it wasn't an overly enjoyable show the other day. But
We've
that's
all
life.
been very similar lately, so hopefully this is different.
It's not a good strategy. We actually should split it up more. It would be better for us long-term.
That's how people should know that we don't confer with our picks ahead of time.
Always good to have the team meeting live on it. That's fine.
We are, of course, talking about the WTA. We've got, again, the WTA 1000 event starting in Madrid. The first round, the first half starts in about, what is that? Not quite 12 hours. Maybe about 6-7 hours, actually. So let's jump in. We'll break down the draw and then go through our picks. Do you have the top half or first quarter ready for us? Oh, there we go. That looks like the first quarter. Make sure I get it right this time and we do more than just half the draw like when it was with Candace. Ashley Barty's our 1 seed. Kiki Burton's down there at 7. Petra Kvitova and Aga Swiatek there. And it's, really, I think, about the seeds in this particular section. Candace, what do you see here in the first quarter?
Very, very top heavy. And I think that's going to be the case for 2 separate quarters of this draw. Well, it doesn't take much thought to guess which quarters those are. But yeah, you talk about the big names right there off the bat. Barty, Swiatek, Kvitova, and, well, I don't know, Kiki Burton. One of these is not like the others, I suppose. But you do have those big 3 names, and I do think it ultimately comes down to them. For me, when I made my way through this quarter, I wound up having Kvitova come through for the sole purpose that the other 2 would have to face each other, that being Barty and Swiatek. I do, in my bracket, I do have Swiatek beating Barty, but I say that as somebody who Barty's been one of those. Barty and Tsitsipas have been the bane of my existence this season. And that says something because actually Barty hasn't even played that much. And yet, we haven't really been friends. We've been on opposite ends of things. So for me, I see her her losing pretty early to Swiatek, which probably means she wins the whole thing.
That's very optimistic. Steve, how do you see this shaking out?
It sucks. It's like so many draws. I feel like we say it every week. Like there's these pockets of these draws that just are full of all the form players who you just want to get involved with, and it just always seems to be panning out this way. You put Barty and Swiatek as the closest seeds to each other, and it's unfortunate that they'll be meeting in the 3rd round. Obviously, there's a name there that stands out that, Elena Vesnina, who hasn't played, for a couple of years now and has just played a couple of doubles tournaments, lead up back is back and gets a tough first round there. But look, if you can figure out and predict the future and know who's going to win out of that Swiatek Barty one, then all power to you. But even if they do win, you've probably got a quarter final. So you're not even out of the quarter yet, and you'd probably need to face a Kvitova or a Kudermetova. Kiki Burton's, it's going to be a while, I think, until we see her as a 7 seed in these big tournaments. Once those ranking points start to drop off a little bit more, but she's effectively the defending champ here, so she seems to like the conditions, and she's got a pretty easy start here. But look, it's a bit of a puzzle. If you can find a way, I agree with Candace that Petra probably looks the way through the bottom portion here, but I feel like this whole quarter will be decided on what you would assume to be a Barty Swiatek 3rd round. But when you go through Barty, I think she's obviously won a lot of matches. She's won 3 tournaments for the year, but she was down match point against Kokova, I think, in the first round in Miami and was, Pliskova served for the match against her. Did Svitolina pushed her? So she's not dominating. So it's hard to make a case here for a number of the players. But how about you, Alex? Who's jumping out to you in this quarter?
You guys have already touched on it, and it's really just because of the imbalance of the draw. It's, as much as it's Ashley Barty and Swiatek, it's as much as the players in the middle just really aren't daunting. Those two have to work their way through Shelby Rogers, Shea, Zidansek, Kozlova, Siegman, and Allison Risk. They're going to be huge, huge favorites against all of them in those matches. So because you kind of have that destiny, if you will, of the third round of the two of them facing off, you go down to the bottom, and you might get excited about Petra Kvitova, but it's a tough draw for her. Buzkova, clay's not her best surface, but I think that match is maybe going to be a little tighter than the odds indicate. We'll see what Vondrasova has this week. Kudermetova has been playing very, very well. There's just some names there that just really kind of bug you. And then Kvitova again still has to beat the winner of Barty Swiatek. So as much as there's some names in here, like you said, that we would like to generally pick and play on, it really comes down to kind of those three. I think if Kvitova does play very well, she could make it through the quarter. But again, it's really the winner of Barty Swiatek that is going to dictate how this goes.
Looking at that top little chunk there, which player do you think is the best chance of causing an upset?
Zidansek.
Yeah. I was leaning the same. Maybe Siegmund could be.
I had Siegmund in mind, but still tricky going against Swiatek that early. But Siegmund was the one who kind of jumps up to me as the potential dark horse, I suppose.
It would be a peak 2021 moment if we were all expecting a Barty Swiatek third round and we got Siegmund Zidansek.
Yes.
That would be a lot of fun. But anything else here we got to talk about, guys, before we jump into the next quarter?
Nope.
All right, we'll be excited. Again, as tough as this one is to talk through and pick, there's going to be a lot of fun matches. That bottom section's really competitive, and I am excited to see Barty Swiatek, and hopefully we don't jinx that. Second quarter, Svitolina there at the top, Bencic at the bottom. Our other seeds, Konta, Muguruza, and again, some competitive names, some interesting names, but maybe to get us started here, it's tough for me to see anyone coming out of this quarter and feeling confident really about them beating whoever comes out of the first quarter. But let's, try to stay focused here a little bit for now. Steve, how do you see this quarter playing out?
I think when you look at the odds that are out at the moment, obviously Muguruza is the big favorite through this section. The big question mark is how fit is she? I know she hurt her knee in Charleston. You remember Charleston quite well, don't you, Alex?
It's a good one. Let's get Charleston 3. Let's do it.
A good one.
Love that green clay. Gonna get myself a green clay jersey.
It was a good fortnight for you. So she did hurt her knee and then struggled, I think, for a couple of games against Putintseva. When I say struggle, she lost a couple of games, which she didn't do in the first set. But just didn't seem to be moving particularly well. For me, she's a player that needs everything to be, close to 100% to be, all systems go. Svitolina, she Engaged Life seems to be treating her well. She's made the Final Four and lost to Barty, I think, on both occasions, in her last two tournaments. So, she does have a tough draw, but you, I guess, need to respect that. It's certainly not a strong quarter. And when you look outside of that, you could make a case for patches of form from even, Pear and Mladenovic look good in qualifying. So did Sevastova and Bogdan. Like they're pretty capable players coming out of qualifying in this section. But looking at the odds at the moment, maybe Svitolina to get through this quarter isn't the worst, and that's the first time I've said that this year. Outside of that, there's players that are all very capable on clay. They just don't have recent form that you can kind of strongly support. How about you?
What do you think, Candace?
Well, I very much am on side with the Svitolina talk. I will say it was the woman on this podcast who said Svitolina would play better now that she's engaged. No more chaos, no more worrying about the boys. She's very confident. She's happy, and we see that coming to the fore. I look for her to come through. I did not find this to be a very difficult quarter by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't think either of the middle ones were. But really, this is one that she should go through and be able to make it through. From the bottom end, it's so much more difficult. I had Jabeur winning a couple of matches, which usually I wouldn't be having at this level of competition. So maybe that shows you something to the lack of depth in this quarter.
I kind of feel a little differently. I think that there are some pockets here where we have some competitive players. Svitolina, as well as she did play last week, hasn't done very well in these conditions. Has never made it actually past the second round here. And as much as I do think she should be favored probably to win the quarter, not to win the quarter, but to win her little section up here at the top, it's going to be a tough go. Teichmann, then Badosa or Krejcikova, then I think Bogdan will probably be there, maybe Putintseva. You're talking about players that, again, she's going to win, but that's going to be 5-6 hours of pretty grueling tennis, I think, before she gets to whoever comes out of the bottom section. And again, it's tough trusting Muguruza, retired in her last match. This will be her first true clay match of the year. She's got Stevens. Stevens looks a little more engaged at the very least, looks to be in shape. We'll see how that match goes. I'm curious to see what Jabeur can do here. And then it's tough to trust Petra Martic, Kiki Mladenovic, Belinda Bencic, or even Bernarda Pera. I mean, it's 2021 and not 2019. For 2019, I'd be going through and, talking about how tough that is. But we'll see. I mean, as we're starting to change surfaces, maybe that's better for a few of these players. It's just hard to get really excited about anybody in the bottom half. And I did look at Putintseva and Bogdan particularly. I think that they're playing well, and I like kind of their sections to win the quarter at some big numbers. But this one's really tough. I think that I did. In my bracket, I picked Muguruza, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, it's really tricky.
I was concerned. I mean, I had Muguruza beating Sloane, but then Jabeur beating her, just because, like Steve mentioned, just the injury concern for mine is a little bit too much. I think going against somebody who's really, really fit, I suppose. I mean, obviously, on most given days, Muguruza should win that very easily, but yeah, it's a dicey section.
Yeah, I guess I have question marks about all of them. Instead of question marks about all of them, I'm going to pick the best player, and I think Muguruza is the best player. I mean, Bencic is in poor form. Mladenovic has looked lost generally. Bernarda Pera playing very well, but should be totally outgunned here. Martic in poor form. Jabeur, nice, smart player, but this isn't her best surface. And then you got Muguruza, and it's sure I'll pick that, but wouldn't bet on it. Any other thoughts, guys, here on the second quarter before we jump into the third?
Could legitimately talk all day about this quarter, but I don't want to.
It's one of those things. You're right. We could have a conversation. I'm not sure it's particularly interesting, but
no.
Hopefully we get some surprises there in the top half.
I was just ruminating my own thoughts for that later this afternoon.
Third quarter to me feels kind of similar to the first quarter in that I feel like we're destined for a particular match, and I think it's the Sabalenka-Halep rematch. What do you think, Candace? Is there any? Can you give me a reason to worry about that happening?
I wish this is where I had my draw filled out here on the paper on the ground, and I could lift up and it would say Sabalenka against Halep. I mean, it's the obvious, right? I think that this is a section of the draw that the big names again should come to the fore. I think Sabalenka, Azarenka on the top, and then I guess it's not as big of a name at the bottom. I mean, Halep is, but I would have her going against Elena Rybakina, and Halep should win that, and I see Halep making it through. Her against Sabalenka going to be fun again. But I'm seeing Halep making it through this section. I think there are a couple of first round matches that are a little bit interesting. But once you get past that, it becomes much more formful for mine.
There's definitely a particular first round match, and you mentioned a name I wanted to touch on. But Steve, why don't you jump in and talk about the quarter in general?
Again, yeah, it does look like it's going to be probably the most competitive quarter for those first round matches. And I don't think there's one. You look at some of the others, and there's a couple that are really, really one-sided, whereas outside of maybe Mertens versus Zheng, you could maybe make a case for all the others being relatively competitive. Look, there's a lot of names, again, there's a lot of names who have shown, over their career on clay that, that they're pretty solid and can produce decent results. And then there's players who in the past haven't, played well on clay recently, who have made their way through qualifying, like Zvonareva, who made me look really silly yesterday. it's trying to find who's going to be up, I guess, for this week. Sabalenka obviously, made the final in Stuttgart, lost to Barty in 3, had a medical timeout, I think, after she lost the second set, 6-love. I think you know what you're going to get from her now. It's just as we get towards the end of the tournament that things will tighten up a little bit for her. That Bagu Kazatkina is going to be a really interesting first round match, and both are capable of causing upsets at their best. You scroll down there, Simona Halep is obviously the big name of this section, but she just seems to find herself wanting and just coming up against those players who are big hitters who can redline. You look at Swiatek even at Roland Garros last year, Sabalenka last week. She just finds herself finding these players who are, in decent form, and she can't really do anything about it with her game. Personally, looking at the odds, I probably lean towards even Azarenka here. I think when you look at her form over the start of the year, her main losses coming out of quarantine in Melbourne. If she's, I think her only actual true loss since then was to Barty in 3 sets in Miami. Yes, she hasn't played a lot of clay tennis, but you kind of know what you're going to get with her game. I think she's one who could really cause a little bit of trouble, I think, in that top section. But at the same time, you could almost make a case for Alexandrova redlining and knocking Azarenka out in 70 minutes. So it is a hard quarter to kind of gauge and find who's coming out of it again, because this one is a little bit more spread. But how about you, Alex? Which name is it that's standing out for you?
But before we touch on that match, you were talking about Halep and kind of her, kind of running into players that may be a little better at her. And it's almost exactly how we talk about Svitolina. And I don't know if she's quite gotten to that point yet, but I wonder if we are maybe giving her a little more credit than we should for that, Grand Slam win at Wimbledon over Serena Williams. And we're kind of thinking about that and her ability and using that as kind of a way to talk ourselves out of, betting against her when she runs into somebody like Sabalenka, who is absolutely less consistent, but at her best is going to be able to play a brand of tennis that Halep really can't do much about. You start to look at the draw, and I think it's kind of the two of them, and there are some fun names. The one match that did stick out to me, Tomljanovic is playing Rybakina in the first round. It's a pick-em. What happened to Rybakina? I know that Tomljanovic has the qualifier advantage and all that stuff, but I feel like I should be betting Rybakina, but I don't know what to do. Were either of you surprised to see that match as a pick-em?
Yeah, it's much closer than I would think it would be.
A little bit, but I've, arguably was too high on Rybakina. I think, just assuming that she was going to return to that form pretty quickly. I think she's probably the player of the top, 30 or 40 that was impacted most. Like, she was flying before the tour was suspended. When you go back and look through what she did over that period beforehand, and just hasn't been able to regain it. It's a tough one because, Tomljanovic was, solid without being spectacular, you could probably say, in qualifying, but, perhaps has looked a little more consistent this year than we've seen in previous years. I just don't know if I can get involved, though.
Yeah, there are some other kind of tiny names. Again, as someone that likes to try to pick, bigger underdogs. The winner of that Kasatkina-Begu match, I think you're right, is kind of going to be a live dog, just being consistent players that, again, if Sabalenka's playing her best tennis, she's going to beat them. But if she's making mistakes, the two of them are going to find ways. I'm very excited to watch that Pegula-Kirstea match. Kirstea has been playing some great clay tennis, much to my surprise. I bet against her a couple times, much to my dismay, and really excited to see her and Pegula, who's one of my favorite players. Don't see much of her on clay. Again, that Alexandrova Azarenka match is going to be spectacular. I think that'll be just a ton of fun to watch. Just two players just hitting the absolute crap out of the ball. And then we'll see how Rybakina does. I think if she can get through that match, this is kind of manageable. As much as I like Elise Mertens, again, she kind of has certain limitations, and it would be nice to see Rybakina maybe come through here. If there was somebody that I wanted to upset the Sabalenka-Halep rematch, I'm excited for. I wouldn't mind if Rybakina were there.
I think in this particular draw, when you look at it, and when you look at the comments from some of the players, like I think Kiki Burton said earlier in the week, that she likes the conditions here. The center court and the couple of those main courts are quite sheltered. It's not indoor, but it almost has an indoor feel to it. It's not as heavy as you get some of those, really heavy European clay in the, damp kind of cloudy conditions. But, those are the type of conditions that generally suit a Halep, I guess, more so. You do have those players that can kind of hit through her in these conditions that we're seeing. in Madrid. So I'm not down on. I'm not going to say the same thing, I guess, about Halep every week, but I just don't think the conditions here suit her as much as perhaps we'll see later in the clay season.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Any other thoughts on the third quarter, guys, before we jump into the fourth?
Nope.
So we're going to continue our pattern of what we pretty sure is going to happen, not sure, pretty sure. I'm not sure at all what's going to happen here. There's a couple names that stuck out to me, and these were actually where my outright picks were. But Naomi Osaka's our 2 seed, Pliskova there as a 6 seed, Brady and Zachary there in the middle. Naomi Osaka, very, very good, but this will be her first clay match of the year. It is a surface that's not very good for her. She starts with a qualifier who should be overmatched, but again has had a chance to be in form. I think Mahova could test her there in the second round, and it just kind of continues to get tougher from there on. Candace, how do you see this fourth quarter shaking out?
Chaos, complete chaos. I don't know. I mean, you start towards the bottom, and I suppose that's what I did and worked my way up through the quarter itself. Osaka, always a little bit dicey at some of these tournaments. When you get away from the majors with her, I always have a little bit of difficulty at this stage of her career kind of gauging like the interest and the motivation. She should be able to win her first round match, and then what happens from there. Well, I think if she goes against Zachary, that she could find herself in real problems. So I have Zachary taking down Osaka there towards the very bottom, and then on the upper portion of this quarter, Pliskova, very logical, nothing too astounding there. But I actually kind of like Jelena Ostapenko as a little bit of a wild card. She's never done particularly well in Madrid, but this is a player that we know last year had a very difficult year on and off the court. And I just feel like in the last few weeks, I've started to see some shades of her coming back, not necessarily always in wins, but she's had a couple of really tight losses where I thought we've seen some kind of flashes of that form. We know in theory that this is her best surface. Maybe Madrid, not the best venue for that. But I could see her stringing together a couple of matches. I think she has a nice little pocket here in the draw. You see Kuznetsova or Venus Williams and Jennifer Brady, who neither of them find this as their best surface. So I think she could do a little bit of damage in here. I mean, we saw Ostapenko go against Pliskova over in Stuttgart, and that was a close enough match for mine. So I kind of like a little bit of a run here from Ostapenko. But for me, I think Zachary looks the one to beat, which is not something I thought I would say, maybe even just a month or two ago.
How about you, Steve? What do you see here?
I'm on a similar page around Zachary, and look, I won't spend too much time on it, but when you look at Zachary, you look at how she's played on hardcourt this year, and she's obviously upped her game. She's noticed she needs to be more aggressive, and she's kind of playing with a little bit more power than probably we've seen from her in the last couple of years. I've always been higher on her clay form, I guess, than her hardcourt form over the last couple of years, and I'm hoping that because we've seen that uplift in her form on hardcourt, that will translate over here. And it's hard to kind of, we don't have a lot to go off at the moment because, I don't think losing to Kvitova in 3 sets on an indoor clay event's the worst form. I think she's got a good spot here. She's in that pocket with, there's Anisimova and Mahova who are both coming off injuries of different lengths that, it's hard to kind of gauge where they're at. I think Kontaveit's vulnerable and maybe even is on upset alert in that first round. And Osaka, again, translating back to that form of hardcourt form to start the year, we saw that she was going bigger on her first serve and trying to be more aggressive on the hardcourt. And I just don't think that's going to translate as well for her on the clay. I don't think she's going to get as many cheap points as she was getting on the hardcourt. And if she keeps her first serve percentage low, she's going to become vulnerable, I think, on that second serve. So I think Zachary's a big play here. I think there's a big potential here in her. And then when you look to the top part of this section, I agree with Candace. Ostapenko does have a good spot there. It's 2021, and she's in a pocket of 4 players with Kuznetsova and Venus Williams. Jennifer Brady's played 1 clay court match since the COVID tour suspension and lost to Towson. It's hard to make a case there in that pocket, and she's got form over Pliskova, although she did lose to her last week. There's form there. So I think that top section, that third round, might be Pliskova versus Ostapenko again. And then looking to the bottom, I think Zachary is a big chance. I think when you look through and you look at her odds even to maybe take the quarter here, that there's a potential there, I think, with her. It's just about whether she can realize that, because the last time I talked her up as largely as I have here, I think she lost to Kristina Pliskova in the first round of a clay tournament. So it's fingers crossed.
So you're just a little nervous, but it's, and I'm going to echo a lot of the same sentiments. You guys hit the nail on the head with Ostapenko. That's a really juicy little spot there for her. She should win those two matches. I feel the same way about Pliskova, despite some of the names there. Goff is not very good on clay. Neither is Pavlyuchenkova or Keys. I thought Pliskova played very well. I thought she honestly should have beat Barty. And I think that, she's kind of working herself into form. And Jessica Pegula is not in this quarter. So feel like she has a real chance here to, kind of make it through that top half. Love what you guys are saying about Sakkari. She waits about as long as anybody to play Osaka, who, again, is going to go qualifier, and Mahova there, who's going to work her. And then Sakkari's beaten her before. She knows what it takes to find some of the errors and take advantage of Osaka, maybe not at her best. And again, it's a tough surface. So I like Sakkari. I like Pliskova. I think, I'm looking at both of them, not only just to win the quarter, but I like their numbers to win the tournament. I think they could actually be live against, either of the players coming out of the third.
And I'd much rather Sakkari play Osaka in the third round than in a final. I think it's one of those ones, if you can get them early when there's less pressure, I think there's more potential, I think, there for the upset.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially the way Osaka kind of builds up her game, as she goes through tournaments. Any other thoughts, guys, here in the fourth quarter before we jump into our picks?
No.
Yeah, I think we can jump on in. Who wants to lead us off? Let's go with Candace. Who's your ace? Who's your ace for the tournament?
My ace is going to be Simona Halep. I found myself gravitating to some of the name players in here over and over again. Obviously, we know how well that she does on the clay in general, and, well, does everywhere, to be perfectly honest with you. These conditions, as we heard Steve talk about, might not be the very best for her, but I do think that she has a better draw than some of the other big names do. Some of them are kind of drawn closer to some other threatening players. So I'm going to go with Halep in here. I was a little bit surprised by her price, to be perfectly honest with you.
And Alex, you wouldn't have gone for someone in the same quarter, would you?
Of course I would. I'm ready. It's Aryna Sabalenka time. I am a huge Aryna Sabalenka fan. I've been kind of waiting for this. I think that she has, what it takes to be really successful in the WTA, and I think she's getting pretty close. I'm not going to bet on her to win this tournament. I'll be very clear about that. But I like her position in the draw. I think she's in a good spot to beat Halep again. Not too worried about her against anybody again in that fourth quarter, as long as she's playing good tennis. And then she gets to the final, and it's, a couple players that have, I think, had a much tougher run than she'll have. And at her very best, she can beat anybody. I think the altitude will actually help her. As hard as she hits the ball, and, she's in pretty solid shape. I think, as you said, Steve, also she'll get a chance to play, I think, in some of those bigger stadiums and bigger arenas where, although, again, there is no roof. It is open. They're down so low, and there's such big stands that wind doesn't quite get down all the way down there. So I think this is a nice spot for Sabalenka in a tournament where, there's a ton of names that we could put in here. I don't know about you guys, but there are 5, 6, 7 names that I could pick from to win this tournament, but I like her the best.
It's like you're
Correct.
taunting Steve by saying that.
There are 5, 6, or 7, and I've also managed to pick someone else in the same quarter as the two of you, and I've gone with Victoria Azarenka. So I've gone a little bit longer.
So third quarter.
Yeah, gone a little bit further out, and I think when you look at her form, it does stack up pretty well. Basically, when you go back to, since the tour resumed in the latter part of last year, she looked solid, I think, in that lead-up tournament in on the clay before Roland Garros. She lost to Schmiedlova at Roland Garros, but she didn't like it. It was cold, it was damp, it was windy. She wanted to be in Florida. But really, since then, when you look through this year, I think, as I said before, that she's got, her form outside of, that week after coming out of quarantine, it stacks up reasonably well. I think, she's the type of player who, she has, I think she could knock off that countrywoman matchup with Sabalenka. I think there's potential there looking through it. And I guess, thinking about this section of the draw in particular, do we think, if we've got each of our players here in the third quarter, do we think that the third quarter can take it all the way?
Sure. I wouldn't bet on it particularly, especially not at the price I just sent you guys in the chat. I just wanted to look it up. You can actually bet on what quarter wins tournaments, and it's plus 225. You'll do much better taking the players we picked and kind of balancing it out. And I think that we have the right names.
I think so, too.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. And again, like I said, I think when we were talking about it, Azarenka could easily, Alexandrova could turn on a performance that I've been waiting to see from her for about 3 years, and it will probably happen this week now that she's facing Azarenka in the first round. But I think, she could take advantage, I think, of that little section of the draw. Now, if we switch to the value picks, we'll start with you, Alex. Who's your value pick?
Before we get to this, Candace, have you ever seen Steve this bummed?
He's so sad.
He's all woe and concern. I'm worried about him. So
Poor guy.
We'll see, guys. Try to be nice to him this week, even if he loses. My value pick this week, if we start to dive into that, Karolina Pliskova. I talked about her a little bit already. I've written a lot of terrible words about her. You can go back. There's a lot of previews where I make fun of her and I don't pick her and I say how absurd her price is and all that good stuff. She's finally in like the 30s, which for someone with her talent, with her ability, with her serve in these conditions, as you start to look in her spot in the draw, that's a ton of value to me. I'm more than happy to back her at that number. I think that she has a great chance if she's, again, playing well. Someone that I can't necessarily trust. I would normally hate betting against her at 10 to 15 to 1, but as someone that, again, has some variance and can play at a high level at 30 to 1, sure, that sounds great. So she's my value pick here. Again, if she can make it through this quarter and start to find some form in conditions that I think will be conducive to the way she wants to play tennis, she has a chance to do very well here and make the final, if not win.
Candace, you wouldn't have picked a value pick in the same quarter, would you?
Never. My value pick is Yelena Ostapenko. Kind of buried the lead when we went through the draw itself because it felt like it was the one person who was not a very obvious name who I like to win several matches in a row. Kind of spoke about it before. I just love the pocket she's in. Typically, my value plays are just purely draw plays. I'm looking at players who that pocket of the draw is just awful. And that's often who I go with. You guys know the deal by now. She doesn't have sensational form coming to this, but a lot of times my value picks don't, and sometimes they reel up a couple just because, you know what, if you're not playing great, it helps to play people who are either playing worse or hate the service.
I like it.
I think so. And again, I wouldn't go into the same quarter as well, but my value pick is Zachary to win the fourth quarter. For all that I said before, I think you can get us at plus $8.50 or $9.50. I think is available at the moment for her to win the quarter. She'll probably have to do the hard job, which would be knocking off Naomi Osaka, but I think there's a bit of value there. I'd rather, and if you're looking at it from an outright perspective, I think Zachary is another one of those players who nerves can get to her, I think, later in tournament. So if you can kind of get that quarter winner or try and get in and out before the weekend, then that's probably the best way to approach taking her in those future markets. Now, unforced error-wise, let's start off with you, Alex. Who's your unforced error for the tournament?
Went kind of out on a limb on this one. I'm giving Naomi Osaka a pass here this week. I think that given the surface, given how long it's been, she's played a little bit. I'm not really putting much pressure on her. And I think that her draw, again, is a little bit tougher than maybe the odds are giving credit. Yes, she's the 2 seed, but she's just going to run through just kind of a gauntlet of players that are either more comfortable on clay or are going to just kind of make her work. And just, I think this is more of a warm-up tournament for her in the clay season. We'll see how it goes. Like you said, and I mentioned earlier, she kind of builds form as the week goes along, but I think she's going to get knocked out kind of too early before she can find her best clay tennis here.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Hopefully it's in the third round against Zachary. Candace, who is your unforced error?
I want to say that I was forced into this. I try to be nice to everybody, and Steve and Alex said, no, Candace, you have to be mean today. So we got to give you somebody. And so I wound up going with Jo Konta for a few reasons. One, winning matches right now is not an easy thing for her. 2, it's 2021. And 3, she's against Yulia Punitseva. That's a really tough first-round match, and I have her losing that match. So sorry, Joe. The boys made me do it.
If it makes you feel any better,
I was pretty nice.
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I told you to go Vesnina.
I feel like I was being mean.
Really forced her.
Stick to the facts there if you want, Candace.
Thank you. That's keeping it real.
I am giving a pass to Kiki Bertens. Defending champ. She's been injured. She hasn't played a lot of tennis. Not really keen to get involved, even though she's like $1.05 or minus, what's that, like 20,000 or something, 2,000. I don't see her winning this tournament. I feel like maybe you could kind of consider her on a trajectory kind of similar, maybe to Matteo Berrettini, but like a month behind.
This didn't bode well for you last time.
No. So look, I think that she will build, and I think there will be probably a later clay tournament where she will kind of maybe take advantage, but I just think it's a little bit too soon at the moment for her. Alrighty. Alex, now so when we pick an overvalued player, generally we pick one player that we think is a little bit under the odds here and that we don't really want to get involved with. Mm-hmm. Who have you gone with?
I have gone with Igashli by Swiatek, which is, as you may have figured out now, a combination of Iga Swiatek and Ashley Barty, because I have seen something in the outright betting market that confuses me, concerns me. I don't spend a lot of time asking people about it. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Ashley Barty and Iga Swiatek play each other in the third round. If whoever wins that match still hasn't won their quarter, they probably have to play Petra Kvitova, whoever comes out of the second quarter, and then somebody all the way down there on the bottom half. Again, a bunch of big names that we talked about. They are two of the top three favorites to win this tournament. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. If you have a good reason for this, please reach out to me. My mind is just completely boggled by this. They're two great players. Ashley Barty and Swiatek should be favorites to win these tournaments, not when they play in the freaking third round. When they're different parts of the draw, they're in different quarters. Maybe that makes sense. But in this particular case, it's just I'm very confused, and I need some help.
Really rolls off the tongue. Iga Swiatek. It's
Igashli Swiatek.
All right, a little bit more bland, but who's your overvalued player, Candace?
I'm gonna take Alex's argument, but I followed the rules and just picked one person because I'm the good kid of this podcast.
You have to throw shade before every segment? Jeez.
Somebody has to do it. You guys, I was gone one episode. It was probably nice and peaceful. Got to come back. I went with Ash Barty mostly because this is what I do now. You know, I go against her. She wins tournaments. And at some point, it's just kind of like, no, I'm going to beat you. And this seems a golden opportunity because she has Swiatek so early. So, you know, when she rolls through and wins, it's going to be so much more fun. We can add this to like the year-end compilations of bad picks. You can put this right behind all the Tsitsipas overvalues that I've had. So, you know, it'll be great.
Maybe like behind some Karatsev as well. Just
yeah.
Kind of add it into the list. Now, my overvalued player, I harped on about her a little bit when we were talking about the quarter, is Naomi Osaka. I'm just curious to see how she goes this week. I think, you know, when you look at her hard court stuff, you know, it was a low first serve percentage that she was working with through a lot of that, you know, Australian Open run. I mean, she's still winning, but I'm just not sure it translates over when you look at the odds. I think for her playing on clay, when you look at what she's done, I think in the past on clay. So I think it's, as we've kind of looked through this whole tournament, it's when you map out all of our aces and value picks are all from the bottom half, but we all, it's more so out of pure avoidance of the first, eight names in the draw, which include Ash Barty and Iga Swiatek.
If you've ever thought draws were rigged, this is a good example of that. They're not.
Can't wait for just a round three. Oh, like we said, it could be a round three between, was it Siegmund and Zidansek?
There we go. We're ready.
If it's Siegmund and Zidansek, we're going live.
This could go full Charleston on us again. Which I mean,
that's what Alex wants.
I'm ready. Sounds great.
I think, did I see Veronika Kudermetova's the same odds to win this tournament than she was to win Charleston?
Actually, I thought she was a little higher. I thought I saw like a 50 or a 60 there instead of a 40. She's a pretty big number here. She has a tough spot in the draw. I'm forgetting right now where exactly she is. I can't remember if she's second quarter or first quarter, but just has some big names to beat. Could be. I'm sorry.
She's first quarter. She's got Vesnina first up, and then Kiki Bertens.
Right. Bet on her to win those matches. She'll be a huge favorite. Look at like a big spread or something. Don't get crazy, but it's just hard to find any value given who she plays from there on.
Alrighty. I think that just about wraps up the draw. Is there anything else we want to touch on?
Nothing for me.
Get excited, big betting weekend, horsies.
You got any horsies for us?
I have one.
One? One's good enough.
Okay. I'm not by any means saying this horse is going to win, and it's not going to end up being my official win pick. But I know for me, when I look at a race like the Derby, I tend to play vertical, so your exactas, trifectas, superfectas. And I'll tell you the horse who I will 100% be using underneath in those plays in the Derby, of course, on Saturday. Saturday here in the U.S. Sorry, Steve. That's going to be the number 13 Hidden Stash. He's a son of Constitution. He's trained by Vicky Oliver, who's not a big-time trainer, but she's always had this reputation of having horses at big prices go much better than they should, given the odds they are. And I don't mind the way that he's come into this race. His last 2 races, by far the best of his career. He was second behind a horse named Helium in the Tampa Bay Derby. That horse is going to get some steam this weekend. I promise you he will. He'll go off shorter than you think he will off his morning line odds. And then last out, Hidden Stash finished 4th behind Essential Quality in the Bluegrass. Essential Quality is likely to be your favorite in the Derby itself. So he's a horse who tends to come from way off the pace. I know those types of horses haven't won the Derby recently since they changed the formatting for how to get in the race. But this year's edition does look very different. There's a lot of speed signed on early. So not necessarily maybe the most likely winner. But again, if you're looking to play exactas, tries, supers, the number 13 Hidden Stash, he is 50 to 1 on the morning line. I wouldn't be surprised if he went off a little bit bigger than that.
I like that. Love a big number.
It's like bigger than anything I think we put on this entire show for, what are we up to, like 23 episodes?
Hidden Stash. That's like what happened with Alex after Charleston.
I'll take a little bit of that. Sprinkle it out.
Alrighty. Well, I think that just about wraps up for Madrid WTA. I guess we'll be back soon with ATP Madrid when that all unfolds. I think I saw Novak Djokovic pulled out of Madrid for next week. So that's going to be a slightly weaker draw, but it'll be interesting to see how that draw kind of pans out in a couple of days. Any other final thoughts from anyone?
Nope.
See you soon.
All right. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in and watched along live or on YouTube. And also, if you do want to catch this, the podcast generally go up within about an hour or so of our streaming live. So you can catch that with Eat Sleep Tennis Show on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or basically anywhere where you find the podcast. I think it gets pushed to. So just if you can like or subscribe or review or comment or rate, they're all different everywhere. Nothing's the same anywhere. It's a little bit like tennis, really. So however you find our content, hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we will be back soon to cover off ATP Madrid, probably sometime on the weekend, I'd guess. So we will chat to